threat of COVID-19 coronavirus, this meeting be conducted by video conference. At least a quorum of the board will be participated by video conference in accordance with the provisions of section 551.125 or 551.127 of Texas Government Code that have not been suspended by order of the governor. And members of the public can also access this meeting through a YouTube connection that they would have to get through, which is on our website and on the agenda. And members of the public who desire to address the board regarding an agenda or non-agenda item must comply with the following registration procedures. A link to a public comment form is available, and it gives the link, which is on the website and on the agenda. This link and form will be active Monday, April the 20th, 2020 from 9 a.m. to 6:50 p.m. Comments submitted will be read aloud during the public comment section of this notice and agenda. And I see that we do have a quorum present. And I'll lead us in the pledges. If you will stand with me, we'll have our pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. The mission statement is Tolosa Midway Independent School District educates every student to be a lifelong learner, a person of integrity, and a positive contributor to society. Has anyone signed up for public comment?
No, sir, we did not have anybody sign up.
We did not have any people sign up for public comment. Thank you very much. I would like to remind everyone that's present, there are several things that we need to know about before. Anytime you speak, you need to say your name first before you speak. And if during voting, and voting will be by roll call, each individual board member present will be asked, and you either say yes for affirmative or no for against. So just remember that whenever, whoever is in this meeting and does speak, you say your name first. That is before making a motion, speaking about any comment or anything, and before you vote. Okay.
Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
This is Billy Lerma. On the, as far as the attendees that are present, board members, I think you should wind up calling the names out to make sure that those are on the list. That way we know we have a quorum. The public really doesn't know if we have a quorum or not, because they may not know us.
Yeah, well, okay, I've watched several of these and they did it several different ways. Ms. Jan,
I'm just saying that.
Ms. Jan Mastella. Present?
Present.
Mr. Felix Landine.
Present.
Ms. Kim Sheck.
Present.
Mr. Billy Lerma.
Present.
And me, Paul Mastella, I'm here as well. Okay, since we done.
Steve Helsher.
Oh, and Steve Helsher. I missed him way up there in the corner.
Present.
Okay, and Mr. Rodney Sumner.
Present.
Philip Carroll. Mr. And Miss Ana Elizondo.
Here.
School principal, Ms. Bartosh. And Miss Holly Anderson are also present. And the board and superintendent secretary, Chrissy Castillo. All right, did I miss anyone? All right, if we've gone through that, we'll turn it over. Mr. Sumner.
Thank you, Mr. Mastella. The first item on the agenda tonight is a discussion and action item. Number 1 says, consideration and possible action to approve food service management contract for 2020 through 2021. I have presented to you a rationale and a cover letter to go along with that recommendation. I've asked Philip Carroll and Chris Casadas to make a brief presentation over that. Chris is at Mr. Landin's residence. And so when he speaks, he'll have to scoot over closer and he'll wave and do that. So Philip and Chris, if you would go ahead and discuss why we're here and the recommendation to be made on our food service management contract.
Okay. Why we're here and voting on this this year is because every 5 years, Texas Department of Agriculture requires you to go out for a bid. Once you do that bid and you accept it, you have the opportunity to go an additional 4 years, 1 year at a time, if you're happy with that. So you can actually take that contract for a full 5 years. If you're not happy with it, you can rebid at any time. This was the end of a 5-year cycle, which ends in June. And so we started the process in February, back and forth with the Texas Department of Agriculture, sending them the contracts. They would make recommendations, changes we had to make up until they were happy with it. At that point, we released it. There were 37 different food service companies, and we had to send each of them the actual packet and invitation. So I took care of all that. Out of all of those companies, 3 of them came to the mandatory pre-bid walkthrough, which is where they tour our cafeterias, they ask questions, and we have to get all of the answers back to them so that they can make a proper bid. 2 of the companies did follow the complete process and submitted bids to us. And so that's what we were looking at today. You received a score sheet on those along with the scoring criteria for them. And the 2 companies that were bidding were Aramark and Taher. The schools district has had a food service management company since 1991. That entire time it has been Aramark. So that was also taken into consideration along with the full proposal, financial stability, references, program innovation, and so forth, and the software they use. So at the conclusion of the scoring, which was myself, Mr. Carroll, and Ms. Riggs, we scored all of that independently. We compiled those scores. We took them to Mr. Sumner, explained those out to them with the rationale, and then submitted it as a recommendation for you.
Now, it's my understanding, Chris, is that the scoring criteria was the criteria established by the Texas Department of Agriculture. And that
Yes, sir.
was included in the proposal that you advertised. So everyone knew what the criteria was up front. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is
Okay.
correct. And the only, they give us the categories and we can place the point values on them, with the only criteria being that cost and financial proposal has to be the highest total points. We can't make anything more important than that.
Okay, Chris, so we have 2 groups that submitted bids. The ranking showed what company came in first place, and why are we recommending that company?
Philip, did you want to add anything else before we do the recommendation?
No.
We totaled up the criteria and the points, and Aramark was the highest scoring vendor. For that, we just the references, the nationwide network that they have, the amount of schools that they're in. And a big thing was that this past year, when we were on a full year of the free feeding, we're projected to make $535,000. They came in with a guarantee of $600,000. So no matter what all the costs are, the employees, their benefits, the cost of the food, everything, Tolosa Midway ISD will receive at least $600,000 at the end of this 1 year.
Okay, and please note, board, that if we had a self-opt and we were running our food service program ourselves, most schools across the state of Texas that are doing their own food service do not make money. They go in the hole. And if you do go in the hole, it is required that you make that up by fund balance. We're going to make up this year, and probably the guarantee Aramark is looking at right now is $600,000 next year. What that allows us to do is, because we can only use that money for our cafeteria and food service program, we get to reinvest that money in upgrades in the kitchen equipment, serving lines, and those things. So it's a great benefit to our school district to receive receive that money back in the district return. So based on that, and I know you guys will discuss it more, the recommendation of the administration is the board approve Airmark providing food service management to our cafeteria for the 2021 school year. The district remain in the universal feed status, and Airmark is guaranteeing a district return of $600,000, which is higher than our projected return of $535,000 for the current 2019-20 school year prior to the school shutdown.
Thank you, Mr. Sumner. Do we have a motion on the administrative recommendation, please?
Mr. Mostella, this is Philip Linden. I move that we accept Airmark as the bidder for the agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Landine. Do we have a second, please?
I so move.
second.
Billy Lerma.
Okay, Billy seconds it. Any comments or questions?
Is this just for a 1-year extension? or is it-
Contract is, I understand the contract is for a 5-year, but we have to renew it every year. Is that correct?
Correct.
It's actually a 1 year, and then we can renew it up to 4 times, but it's a 1-year contract.
When we renew it up to that 4 times, we don't have to rebid it. But at the end of the 5-year period is when we have to rebid this.
Correct.
Thank you for the questions. Does anyone else have any other comment? Okay, if there are no further comments, I will vote in the affirmative, yes. Mr. Landine?
Dean, I vote yes.
Yes. Ms. Scheck?
Yes.
Mr. Lerma?
Yes.
Mr. Helsher?
Yes.
Ms. Mostella?
Yes.
There we do. It's 6-0 because we only have 6 members present. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's Paul Mostella once again. Mr. Sumner?
The second item on the agenda tonight is consideration and possible action to set food service prices for the 2020-21 school year. I know Philip will give you a little bit of an explanation of why we're doing that. Even though we're in that free feed program, we're still required to continue to increase our food service prices so they get to the minimum established by the Texas Department of Agriculture for reimbursement. And so he's going to recommend a 10-cent increase on lunch and a 5-cent increase on breakfast. Mr. Carroll.
And I just want to point out, if you look at the handouts, I know it seems crazy that we have to do this, but we're still well below the federal reimbursement rate, which is what the feds want us to get closer to. And if you look, I do apologize, I don't have all the rates for the surrounding districts for this year, but I know they went up higher than what they were the year before, and they're all going to raise their prices again. So we're still well below our peers, except for Corpus Christi ISD, and we're still well below the federal reimbursement rate.
So what would be the lunch prices and the breakfast prices for next year, sir?
I think lunch is going to go up to I think it's 210, I think. 220 maybe. I'm sorry, I don't have the handout in front of me.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and read that. Breakfast is at 130. Elementary lunch is at 205. Secondary lunch will go to 220 is what I see in the presentation.
That's correct. And just remember, breakfast is, even without, if you don't take in the CEP program that we're in, always before that, breakfast was always free because we do breakfast in the classroom and all the way through 8th grade. So breakfast only pertains to the high school. And then once again, we're just doing this to keep to keep our prices in line with what the feds are requiring us to do, so that when we do go off of CEP in a couple of years, that's what we'll have to start charging.
Okay, Mr. Masella, the administration's recommendation that the board approve the proposed paid meal prices as indicated on attachment 2. Paul, you need to unmute yourself.
Do I have a motion on the administrative recommendation, please?
So moved.
I second that. Felix?
Felix Landine. Okay. Any comments or questions? Okay. All those in favor? Felix Landine,
Aye.
Billy Ledema,
Yes.
Kim Sheck,
Yes.
Ms. Mastella,
Yes.
Mr. Helsher,
Yes.
Paul Mastella votes yes as well. Thank you very much. Sumner.
The next item on the agenda, number 3, consideration and possible action regarding resolution regarding rating, GPA, and class rankings. And I've given you a resolution. Basically, we've got a little bit of an issue because the closure that first happened in the middle of May, now that we did not have an opportunity to finish the 5th grade or a grading period through the 5th grading period for our class rankings. And so we had to make a resolution to modify board policy EIC local to look at several topics. One of those topics was the looking at the class rankings. The second topic was looking at how are we going to provide grades for the time of the closure, whether we're going to look at a number grade or a pass incomplete. The third thing is to look at how is this going to impact the GPA for the future, because we've got basically a semester where we don't have grades. And then the last thing is that this modification in EIC local is only good for the remainder of this school year and is just for that, and it will resume when we start school back with our normal policy. So basically, and I have Ms. Bartosh and Holly here to provide any questions you might have, but as they looked at the first thing dealing with class rankings, we basically had 2 options. We can stop the rankings at the semester, or we can go to the end of the 4th 6 weeks. Now, in a normal cycle, we go to the end of the 5th 6 weeks, which basically means in the spring, you have over 2/3 of that spring course counting for your GPA. The administration's recommendation, Ms. Bartosh and Holly, is after further discussion, they feel it's in the best interest to stop the rankings at the semester. And that way that's a full semester of counting that. And they would like to recommend that. They feel the 4-6 weeks would not be valid because then we have a short period of time dictating a lot more of the effort a student put in for 11 and a half years. Now, I think what I'd like to do, Mr. President, instead of going through each one, all of them together, is stop and ask for input from the board, questions from the board before I go to the next one, if it's okay with you. Does the board, administration feels that the semester would probably be what's best interest of our students. Any comments?
This is Billy Ledema. My question is on that, if we ended at the semester and we look at the 4th 6 weeks, is that what you're saying? Right?
We're gonna stop the grading for GPA at the semester. The
Right.
4 weeks would not count at all.
Okay, but my question would be, is there a big difference in that fourth 6 weeks that would make a difference for the end of the semester? Does it change the GPA that anybody for like valedictorian, salutatorian, does that?
It does
Make a
not, no, it does not change the vowel, the
That's
sound.
what I wanted to know, you know.
There is one change. One student would drop off of it and one student would come on potentially if you looked at the 4 6 weeks.
Okay.
The kids only know the midterm, but there's no change in the top 2 or 3 on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'd like to go on to the next topic is I think the administration's recommendation, and we've been keeping up with this throughout the area, is that we would, because it's a little hard to determine who's doing all the work at home on these online or offline stuff that we do, and it's really tough to grade. And since we have not had a lot, we've got some kids that we have not been able to contact with. Our recommendation is that we go for the spring semester to a pass incomplete. What that doesn't mean pass fail. What that means is, and we'll have a standard what we set up for the pass. Most everyone will get to that pass standard, but if we haven't got a hold of someone or they're not doing anything, then we give that kid an incomplete. And then when we come back, they'll have an opportunity, or at any time, we'll have the opportunity to change that incomplete to a pass. So we will not be harming that kid academically in any way during this closure. So we feel that that's in the best interest of our kids to help them through this crisis. So if they don't have the technology at the home, or if they don't have a parent that has the ability to help them. Now, what we're going to have to look at then is how are we going to provide the kids an opportunity to change that incomplete? Whether we look at summer school opportunities, whether we do that when we come back to school in the fall, that we have an opportunity that we try to regroup what the kids they missed before we go on to the next one, or we do it during intersession. We'll be providing some kind of remediation type opportunity to get any kids caught up that needs to get caught up during this time. We're not trying to hold out of 300 kids. We're not trying to give 250 an incomplete. We're trying to keep that number down to a bare minimum, and then giving those kids a hope to be able to recuperate that and get on track, if that makes sense. Holly, you or Ann want to add anything to that particular rationale?
No, this is Holly. I just wanted to say that what Rodney, that I heard it said very well, is we don't know if all students are not doing the work because they don't want to do the work, or if they're not doing the work because they cannot do the work. We have lots of different situations and different families and different homes so we have found some have a lot of access, some have no access. And we just don't want this time period that we're going through to harm any of our students and detrimentally grade someone for a situation they cannot control.
Ann, do you have anything to
I agree. You know, we're leaving up our lessons. So even as we speak, because we contact kids every week, we're still allowing kids to make the incomplete up from 5th 6 weeks. So that's even now an ongoing process with us. As we capture them, we get them back on track and we get them doing it. So I just don't want anybody hurt from this. And the grades are not really authentic because you don't know who's doing it or how much work they're having and if they're struggling, and you know their parents are gone working. It's tough on kids.
Oh, okay. Does any comments from the board? Mr. Landine, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, that's it. What do y'all suggest? Do y'all feel comfortable with the way we're doing it to try to follow up on these kids, or shall we continue the same program? Do y'all feel okay with that? Or is there another way that we could do?
This is Holly, and I'll respond. I feel like our teachers are doing a very good job of providing the instruction, whether it be online or offline, to the best of their ability. But again, I think we have outside situations that we have no control over sometimes that cause us not to be as effective as we would like to be. We are working every day to improve. It's new to us too, but we're working constantly to make sure that the quality of work and quality of effort is our biggest interest right now and our biggest focus.
And
Well,
I
I'm
would,
sure that it's,
if I
everybody's
knew
concern.
100% of our kids had technology at home, that the technology online thing is a good platform. However, we've been trying to get paper copies for some out also. And we've got kids and parents that are overwhelmed at home. It's just a lot of, it's a lot of work. Parents are struggling in some regards. I heard one say the other day, they're doing some kind of fourth grade English, and they were struggling with trying to help their child through that process. So I think given the circumstances, we're doing everything we can. And then the idea is that when we do get back in the regular situation, try to put a system in place to try to go back and identify some things that any kid might have missed along the way, to provide them that opportunity to catch up and be on track with everyone else. So it's going to cause us to work harder, but I think that's what our game plan is right now. So I think we've got a pretty good plan in place.
Yeah, Holly, again, just one last thing, just to assure all of you, the instructional team meets weekly to debrief about everything that is occurring during the week. We talk copiously about what kind of instruction we're providing and what we need to improve on or what needs to change. It's a constant ongoing conversation, and we're in a constant improvement mode. So just to assure all of you that we are taking a look very closely at what we're doing and how we're providing instruction.
And I have been sharing with all the board her notes from her instructional meetings in our closure reports that I provide to you daily to let you know the things that we're discussing. And so we're working toward that particular avenue. The next thing in the resolution basically just says that GPA calculations going forth for freshmen, sophomores, and juniors will not include this spring semester. So for example, a freshman through 4 years would have 8 semesters. Now that freshman in this graduating class would only have 7 semesters counting for their overall GP. The 4-6 weeks will be considered in the pass fail, but it won't count toward GPAs. So it won't hurt anyone one way or the other. They just do not have that particular counted in the GPA. And then the last part of the resolution just says board policy EIC local will resume without modification starting the 2021 school year, with the exception of the GPA calculations impacted described in section 3 above. Now, I did make one correction in the resolution. I mistakenly had the through May 4th, and I've corrected that through May 29th. All students in district were impacted. So the administration would like to recommend that the Board of Trustees approve the resolution to temporarily modify EIC local board policy and board policy EIC local will resume without modification in the 2020 school year, with the exception of the GPA calculation impact described in this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Sumner. Do we have a motion on the administrative recommendation, please?
Mr. President, Jan Mostella, I so move on that recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Mostella.
I second it, Billy Lerma.
Billy Lerma seconds it. Any comments or questions?
This is Stephen Helsher. I have a question on section 3 about the GPA only for the 7 semesters, not 8 semesters.
Yes.
Will that also include kids who come transferred in from other schools?
I think we would probably have to do it that way, Steve, to make sure everyone's on a even platform with our kids. Otherwise, it might be could give a kid an advantage. So my answer to that question, Holly, I think I'm right when I say yes, that would include anyone else coming in during that period of time.
I believe that is what, this is Holly. I believe that is what is currently in policy.
Okay. Convert if they came in with a letter grade for this spring semester, pass. If they have grades, it's probably be pass.
Correct.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Hilscher?
Okay, other comments?
Thank you. Okay.
Any other comments and questions? I know this is a difficult time for all of us, especially with the kiddos and keeping track of them and everything. It's about the best thing we can do and the most sustainable thing that we can do to make sure that our kiddos are taken care of.
Yes, sir.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions? Okay. Now we have a motion and a second with roll call vote. Mr. Landine.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Lerma.
Yes.
Ms. Scheck.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mastella.
Yes.
Mr. Helsher.
Yes.
Thank you. 6-0 there. Thank you very much. Now we move on to the next item. Mr. Sumner.
The next item on our agenda is number 4, consideration and possible action to determine alternate date for graduation ceremony. Probably the most heartbreaking part of this whole process with the school closure is the impact that it's had on our seniors. Those kids that at this particular point are the memories that they're making of bringing their public school career to a close. We've had to have a lot of activities canceled. And one of those things that we're gonna have to look at is graduation. Our graduation right now is is scheduled for Thursday, May 21st at the American Bank Center. I think it's probably unlikely that that will be able to happen. Now, that's going to depend on whether the city will allow us to have an event that will have a crowd there. So with that in mind, most of our area schools are trying to come up with an alternate date. We have been able to generate or to reserve Thursday, July the 9th with the American Bank Center to hold graduation in case the May 21st date is canceled. Now, there's a couple situations that come into the play. First of all, we may have some kids that are looking at joining the military and may leave early and would not be able to participate in July the 9th. Or we may have some that will not be in the area and would not be able to participate. So what I'm proposing is that we have if anyone cannot, if the May 21st is canceled and we cannot have July the 9th, that we do a virtual graduation for those students that are unable to attend July 9th. They'll come up, we'll take pictures, we'll get cap and gown, give them the diploma, and give them an opportunity to have that moment. We would, if that, that would be those kids, and it will give them the option if they want to try to do that. And to go along with social distancing, we'd probably ask the board president and myself to be in a room, maybe even the student and their parents, limited number. They can stand in the area in the back. We can get a photographer to take a picture as the student is given the diploma in their cap and gown, and we can do something nice for that group of kids so that they can have somewhat of a graduation ceremony. Now, we've got to look at also the potential is what happens if we're not even, if we can't do it on July the 9th? And that it may even be an option. Well, the American Bank Center does not have any dates left, or they don't have any dates available in August. They pretty well told us this is our date. And so if July 9th is not a reality, our next option would probably be to have a graduation at a football stadium in the evening. And so we'll do something a little bit even different from what we've done in the past, depending on when we can do that. And we're still looking at other options of what we can do to, there are some school districts that are doing drive-by graduations where they have kids in cars in the parking lot. They'll drive up, someone will get out, the board president gives them the diploma, and they drive off. And so we would like to rely on the American Bank Center first, July 9th, 2nd. And if those do not work, we'll look at other alternatives. But whatever we do, if a kid cannot make one of those later summer graduations, we'll provide them a virtual opportunity to get a picture, cap and gown, and get a diploma, and try to do something special for them. So it's the recommendation of the administration that the board set July 9th as an alternate date for graduation in case the original date, May 21st, is unavailable due to the coronavirus outbreak, governmental restrictions at the time, and safety concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Sumner. This is Paul Mostello. Do we have a motion on the administrative recommendation, please?
Mr. Marcella, this is Felix. I move that we accept the recommendation of the administration for July 9th date.
Thank you,
for
Mr.
graduation.
Landine. Do we have a second, please?
This is Kim Schick. I second.
Thank you, Kim. Are there any comments or questions from anyone, please? Once again, it's unfortunate we have to go through this, and I do myself feel for our seniors, but we'll do the best we can to provide them with that opportunity. Any other comments or questions? Okay, all those in, and I'm just going to roll call. Mr. Landine?
Mr. Landine, would you say it again?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Lerma?
Yes.
Ms. Scheck?
Yes.
Ms. Mostello?
Yes.
Mr. Helsher?
Yes.
This is Paul Mostello. I vote yes as well. 6-0 vote. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Mr. Sumner?
Mr. Mostello, number 5 is on the discussion action item is consider and possible action to approve the instructional calendar for the 2021 school year. This is something that we had completed that we were ready to recommend in March. And with all the closure things that went along with that, we sort of held on to it. And I'm gonna let Holly make a brief presentation on this because the site-based committee is the one that recommended this calendar. We're gonna go ahead and improve the instructional calendar, which is a year-round calendar starting in July. However, we know that there is a potential, a possibility that may not happen. But we will look at some alternatives down the road, and we've got a little bit of time to plan for those. Our goal is to hang on to our year-round schedule as best as we can do. And unless we have a mandate from the state level, we're going to try to do everything we can to open up on our regular, on this regular schedule. So Holly, would you go ahead and talk to the board a little bit about the calendar, what it holds, and what you did to come up with this recommendation?
Yes, this is Holly. The site-based committee is made up of teachers, administrators, parents, and community members, all gathered over several meetings, 2 or 3 meetings, if I remember correctly, to take a look at what the options were and develop drafts. Each campus developed a campus draft. Believe it or not, when they came back, it was very interesting for the first time in several years. They were extremely similar and not many differences between them. We were able to sit as a group, as a committee, and pull a district calendar together is the one you're looking at today. It does still contain a minimum of 187 days for teachers, 178 days for students. That does help us meet the required minute of 75,600 minutes per school year. In fact, it far exceeds that number. We did have conversations about Mondays after intersessions, which were placed back in because they feel as if they need that for further staff development time and time for planning for curriculum and other things. So we put that in, but had a very healthy conversation about needing all staff on board when we have those and not wanting to face the same issues we have in the past with staff members taking those days off for personal reasons. As you see, the calendar looks very similar to this current school year. It didn't change much other than the positioning of some staff development days throughout the school year after those intersessions. There are still those weeks in December and January that provide a very long break, but a very much approved break by our community. I did this year for the first time provide a survey opportunity for our community members to respond with any comments or thoughts they had about the current calendar to help us with the development of this calendar. Out of all of those, in your cover letter, I put some data in there. We had just under 200 people respond. Over 140 or so were positive and appreciative of the calendar as it is. And there were a few that had some things to say about childcare and maybe the long break at Christmas causing some type of regression. But I think we can address those things with even already starting this year, some of our campuses provided work throughout that long break to help make sure we stayed on top of instruction and not lagging from one grading period to another, because it's long for some kids. And we can also talk about some childcare opportunities. Maybe we can open up care camps like we have in the past. But typically the overwhelming response from our community was they want to maintain the year-round calendar, and they appreciated the calendar that we had in the 1920 school year and wanted to move forward with the same type of calendar. So this is the calendar that was drafted and proposed to you for approval.
Okay, Holly, thank you. Now, one of the a comment that I'd like to make to all of you is if the board approves this calendar, is that there are still some unknowns. What I plan on doing to the teachers is to let them know, guys, be very careful about you. We cannot, with 100% accuracy, say that the intersessions we schedule we're gonna hold them as we have on that calendar. Because if we come back and we're unable to open in July and things get pushed back, that calendar will have to be modified and changed. And so I'm going to tell everyone up front, be very careful. Do not schedule trips and those type of things during intersession this next year because of the uncertainty we have with the virus, the coronavirus, what may happen that is out of our control. So I'm going to give them forewarning on that thing right now.
One last thing, if I may, Rodney, just to make sure that it is very important that we secure our year-round calendar prior to the year, so the school year beginning in July, because we don't want to lose that grandfathered status, because if we ever move away from year-round, we cannot go back to year-round. So that is very important, and we may have to also look at options for maintaining our start date, but possibly starting remote as we are now. Hopefully not, but that's a possibility.
Okay, thank you, Holly. Ms. Stella, the administration would like to recommend that the board approve the instructional calendar approved and by the district site-based decision-making team for the 2020-2021 academic school year as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Sumner. This is Paul Mostella. Do we have a motion on the administrative recommendation, please?
Mr. Mustella, this is Jan Mustella. I make a motion that we approve the academic calendar for the 2020-2021 school year.
Thank you, Ms.
Mr.
Mustella. Do we have a second,
Marcella,
please?
as Felix Landina, second that motion.
Thank you, Felix. Are there any comments or questions, please?
Mr. Marcella, I would like to thank Holly for bringing that information up. I wasn't really aware that we could lose our status the way we are if we didn't do this. So thank you for bringing it up. And I think we need to be reminded every so often about what we possibly could lose the status of a year-round school.
There's only right now a handful of schools left that are doing year-round. And when they changed the law, they grandfathered us in, but they will not allow any other new schools to go to a year-round school. And so as long as we continue with that platform, we can continue doing that, but they're not allowing anyone else to do that. And so it is very important for us to try to maintain it. Our community, our teachers, they like the year round, and we want to do everything we can to promote that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comments and everything. We do have a motion and a second. Roll call. Mr. Landine,
Yes.
Mr. Lerma,
Yes.
Ms. Scheck,
Yes.
Ms. Mustella,
Yes.
Mr. Hel,
Yes.
Paul Mustella, yes as well. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much. Mr. Sumner.
Well, the next item on the agenda is consent agenda discussion action item. We have the check payment register, March 2020 financials, tax collection report for March, budget amendments, and the minutes of the regular board meeting held on March 23rd, 2020. The administration would like to recommend that the board approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Sumner. This is Paul Mustella. Do we have a motion or the administrative recommendation, please?
This is Kim Schick. I move.
Make a motion that we accept the consent agenda items 1 through 5.
Okay, there's a tie there, but thank you, Ms. Mustella. Ms. Schick, you seconded, do you?
I second.
Thank you very much. Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Landine,
Yes.
Mr. Lerma,
Yes.
Ms. Scheck,
Yes.
Ms. Mustella,
Yes.
Mr. Helcher,
Yes.
Ms. Paul Mustella, yes as well. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much. Now, we do have closed session items from what I understand. So the board will convene its closed meeting as authorized by Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, for possible employment, employee issues and concerns, 551.074, renewal of administrative contract, Molly Martinez, discuss and consider recommendation for renewal of teacher term and probation contracts, employment of certified personnel, 551.074. The closed session item requires action. The board shall take such action convening an open session. 551.102, a certified agenda of closed session is maintained. 551.103, and items are posted and disclosed in accordance with the law. 551.4. It is 7:49 p.m., April the 20th, 2020. We are in closed session.
Mr.